might be my favorite experience of.
I was legitimately thinking this. We've done like around 16, 17 episodes. We've only done this for like 4 months. Still pretty new, but I was already thinking like, I think this is already my favorite.
This is amazing.
That's crazy.
Special guests and off topics in this segment. Anything goes. You are listening to 3 p.m.
My name is Leah Hardy, and I'm from a small town in the Navajo Reservation. It's called Cameron. It's right outside the Grand Canyon. So my family, we own land about 30 minutes outside of the Grand Canyon National Park. So I grew up in that area. I also grew up in Flagstaff, so I claim that as part of my hometown. Arizona born, Arizona raised. I grew up, my parents currently live in Delcon, Arizona, so there's no running water. We barely have electricity, so it's kind of very, very rural living on the reservation. So that's kind of part of my background. I currently go to school at BYU. I'm in my master's program studying to be a psychologist. So like you, I love scary stories.
Yes.
They give me life in some cases where I am just so intrigued. I want to know more. And I think coming from my culture, I'm full-blooded Navajo, and our culture is orally kept. So things are passed down through stories. So it's in my blood to be able to tell stories and to hear them, and to be a storyteller, to be a good one, is considered like a very, very good thing, to be able to tell a story. As a kid growing up, we used to scare each other. It was just the thing, we had the older cousins, and we would all throw a mattress in the back of the truck, and we would, like I said, you're living in this area where there's no neighbors, it's dark, and you just throw a mattress in the back of the truck and you scare each other. And then you sleep in back of the truck, and when you need to use the bathroom, it's like you pee on yourself because you don't want to leave because you're so scared. And your cousins are like, oh, if you leave, you're gonna get got. And it's but I love it. You like, it scares you, but you still are so attracted to it. So I grew up telling scary stories, and I love it as well. But yeah, like I said, I'm from the Navajo Reservation. I grew up there. And a part of the culture is Skinwalkers. And the Navajo word for it is Yanalkloshi. And so I guess the rough, simple translation for that is they go on all fours. And Skinwalkers, I think they're often portrayed as like these people who shapeshift into animals, or werewolves or whatever. And I think that's also why I'm really glad I'm doing this with you guys, is because if I'm going to tell about Skinwalkers, like I mentioned before, it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. But if it is talked about, I want to be able to share the correct information about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to clarify things.
No, for sure. We super appreciate that, because as much as we love like the thrill of a scary story, how you were just explaining, at least for me coming into this, I want to be able to kind of just understand the whys behind it. Charles mentioned earlier that I'm always looking like for answers. And in these kind of things, we don't always find the answers. A lot of times there's loose ends, and that's okay. But just trying to understand as best as possible, I think that's really valuable and gives more meaning to the story. And especially in circumstances like this where there's a lot of culture and history involved, I think it's important to know the origins of it and how it all came into fruition. So
yeah, because to me, it's kind of like what you described. I kind of feel like it has been like Hollywooded, you know what I mean? Like we know the movie version of it, So it's very powerful to hear from you, like you said, the truth. So I think I'm so excited just that you're here.
When you're like introducing yourself, I was like sort of tearing up because I was just getting so excited. So I just wanted you to know that like we're stoked for you.
You telling, like, even just starting it out with like the bed in the back of the truck, and I assume you guys would just drive to somewhere and hang out, tell stories, and just be with each other.
Bro, we can relate.
Yeah, and that like got me so excited. So
I can relate / want to go and do that, actually.
Yeah. But stories is just like everything. So this is awesome for us.
Well, I like it too. So I think I found my people here.
From my experience, there's a taboo on even saying it. Is that correct? Like, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I would think that I'm taking kind of like a risk talking about it outside of
shoot.
It's not, I'm not saying like it's a bad one, but it's something where not a lot of people get like you sharing this information, you wouldn't get it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So yeah, it's very like it's very personal in a way, these stories that people have, because they totally believe in them and have real experiences with them. So these are the stuff I have prepared for you, are things that I've experienced and my family's experienced. So yeah, it's real. But I think I'll just go ahead and jump into it then.
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess to understand the Skinwalkers and how I guess you have to go back to the culture a little bit. So on the reservation, it's a completely different world. It's a lot of Navajos, and it's exclusively Navajo. And a lot of the traditions and the language and culture is still alive there. So like Deejay mentioned earlier, a lot of people are superstitious. It's very nature. People are in tune with nature. Different animals represent different things. Even just the plants, and the plants have spirits. The sand has spirit. Everything is. The concept is called hojo. It means harmony. So it's just, if you ever go to a reservation, it's just a different world. It's a different feeling. It's a different vibe, because the culture is just so saturated within the people. And so Skinwalkers is a part of the culture, because to us, they're not just people who shapeshift into animals, they're also witches. So they are just evil witches who go about casting spells, who go about, the term is gushy, they go and they cast spells on people, they go and they witch them. So Skinwalkers, there's a process to become a Skinwalker. You just don't get bitten by a werewolf or anything like that. It's kind of it's a gruesome process. You're basically selling your soul. The way that a Skinwalker becomes a witch to get the powers that they need is they find a loved one, the person that they hold dearly to their heart, and they kill them. And then once they kill them, or do any other heinous things to them, they grind their bones, and they have a little pouch, and they put that bone powder, and that's what they use to cast their spells.
Whoa.
So that sacrifice of a loved one is what gives them their power. And they lean very heavily on secrecy. So their identity is they rely upon going out in the night and not being able to be recognized, because the way that tradition goes is, if once they're recognized, they have to go kill themselves, because their identity was revealed. Because they're just like normal people in the community. You could be somebody you know, it could be your neighbor, it could be someone you met at the store, who they rely upon their secret identity. But once you figure out who they are, it's they have to kill themselves. So they say that the best night for the nickname that we say is Yanny. So the perfect night for a Yanny to go around is when it's windy, because their tracks can blow off by the wind. The wind also carries their calls. On the Navajo Nation, it's forbidden. It's highly discouraged to whistle at night, because you're calling them to you. So
That's crazy because
Yeah.
that's in Hawaii too.
yeah,
We believe that you like whistling at night calls like evil spirits.
yeah, that's exactly what we believe too.
Okay.
And your uncle, right?
Yeah, I shared this story previously on a different episode, but a story of that I know of. My mom and my aunt, my family does a family camping reunion thing every year, and this was when they were teenagers. All the teenagers and cousins are like in one big tent, and one of my uncles, who is honestly one of the funniest people. But when he's a teenager, like you think you're invincible as a teenager, you know, you can do whatever you want. And he starts whistling as a joke and he's laughing. And all the cousins are like, please stop. Don't do that. And he's like laughing while he's doing it. And nothing happens. They go to bed. In the middle of the night, he's like tossing and turning. And he gets up and he takes off his shirt. And you could see there's scratch marks on his back. And they attributed that to him whistling earlier and kind of like mocking it too by laughing. But that's just an example of, you know, the whistling at night, at least in
Yeah.
Hawaii. But
Yeah. The same goes for us as kids. Like I said, we would pile up in back of the truck, and then when one of us had to use the bathroom, they would joke and they would whistle. And it was like everybody would be scared and ready to run away. But yeah, that's a real thing.
You were kind of talking about windy nights in the
Yeah,
tracks.
yeah. So that we believe the part of the reason why they whistle is so the wind can carry it. So windy nights and the clear nights is so that they can see where they're running to. So, growing up, my mom would, if it was a clear night and it was windy, she would say, "Come inside," or they would tell you, "Don't whistle and just come inside and close the windows and close the blinds," and because it's a night that they are known to run around. Another part of it too is they're just people. They're witches. They're people, and so they're just people who do evil things. And so, in a way, I don't know, that gives me comfort to know that they're just people, because my grandma used to always say, you don't fear them, or don't be so scared, because if you're so scared, you're feeding their power, you're giving them strength. So don't fear them. Growing up, she used to tell us, don't be afraid at the night. Don't be afraid to go out and live your life and at nighttime, because to her, she would tell us night is called grandfather. So grandfather is night, and grandfather protects you and takes care of you, and so there's no reason to be scared of him. So my grandma was always like, if you ever see one, you don't run. You say, "Hey, who are you? I'm going to find out who you are, because you have to die." And she's like, "No, don't be scared."
Your grandma's a G.
Grandma going hard.
That was wild.
She's wild. Like I have a story that involves her and her experience. But yeah, so far it's kind of like the basics of Skinwalkers.
while covering the basics of Skinwalkers, 2 questions. One, are they just Navajo, or is it all across different Native American tribes?
I can only speak for the Navajo tribe in saying that because of it's rooted in different, just kind of within our history. Mm-hmm. So I'm not exactly sure what other tribes have, because I would think that it goes back to their history, their culture, their region that they live in. But for Navajos, it's specifically the Skinwalkers is kind of something that we believe only happens within our reservation.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Huh. Okay. My second question is, I guess I might have an answer to this. I don't know if it's true, because pretty much everything I know about Skinwalkers is hearsay, things that I've read. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I've talked to any Native American and talked to them about Skinwalkers. The ones that I've talked to, they don't want to talk about it, mm-hmm. which is fine, So you're like the first person who, like, everything you've shared so far is like brand new to me, which is wild. But
yeah, I was going to say the same thing, like the fact that they're like people, because I think there's a lot of mysticism involved with the folklore. And so you're just like, they're just sound so scary. Like what would you do? You know, and then your grandma and this perspective of like, hey, they're just people who do evil things. Like you actually have more power than them if you like really believe, you know.
Yeah.
That's
So
comforting.
the answer that I have for this question, I guess I want to put it up against yours if you've heard it before, if it's true or not. But do you know the origin of Skinwalkers, how it all started?
I think, I'm not an expert on it, but from different stories that I've heard, and the most common one that I've heard, it was that originally they were used in war. Back then, and the Navajos are known as a warring people. They're very fierce warriors, and so some of them would shapeshift to go and spy on different enemies or go in the night. But eventually, people just become wicked and start using that power for evil purposes. And like I said, they're just people, and they're people who are jealous, who are greedy, who just want different things, and so they've taken that power and use it for evil.
Yeah.
That's the most common thing that I've heard.
That's pretty similar to what I heard. The only different element from the answer that I read was that the power in itself wasn't bad. They used it for good to spy on their enemies, especially like during like the colonization of America. They would send like spies out to the Americans and just trying to just spy on them. And then after time, especially with the history between America and Native Americans, a lot of them who had that power turned bitter naturally, and then started using their power for evil. So
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
okay.
Is there like any like animal or symbol that's like really associated with them that like for example, my main thinking of the question is like a serpent for Satan, right? Is there anything like that in like the folklore or culture that represents them?
Yeah, so the coyote is one. He's like a trickster, like mischievous kind of guy. But a lot of them often I've never seen one before, but often they're described as a coyote or a wolf or something like that. Different animals mean different things in the culture. Owls represent death. So it's just kind of they choose whichever form that they want to take. But it's most common a coyote or something that runs on fours.
Yeah.
I had a question. So like, and like, please forgive my ignorance, but before this, really all that we've learned is like from what we've read online or just what's passed around, campfires. But every time the subject of skinwalkers comes up, there is such a taboo of even saying the word skinwalker, to the point where we were camping last week and we were sharing scary stories, and someone said, I have a skinwalker story, and someone sitting around the fire stood up, left, and she's like, I'm not doing that, and just walked away. And so like I've experienced that taboo way more than once. It's like every time it comes up, someone's like, please don't say that,
Yeah, people will talk about like possessions from the devil and like all these other different hauntings and whatnot, but as soon as somebody says skinwalkers, there's always people who are like, no, I'm not participating in that.
Yeah, and I think personally that just kind of goes back to it's a culture, it's a real thing. Like I wish that we can just get in the car and go to the Reds right now, because then you would just feel how different it is, and how I think even traumatizing these experiences that people have had that have been carried in a story throughout a family, and it can scar, it can, to the point where you don't even want to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could understand that, because being from Hawaii, it's very similar in that we believe that there's life in everything, and our relationship between the people and the land is like so important. There's like an actual relationship where there's take and give on both sides, and that relationship needs to be respected. It needs to be built upon, and you nourish it together and you grow together, and having that translate into things that are not so good or evil, I guess, can be just as real. So that makes perfect sense. But
So is there kind of a taboo? Like, is there any like power in saying it?
You know that I don't know, because once again I grew up with a grandmother who said she openly talked about these experiences. She was just like, why should it be a taboo? These people are bad, and why should I give in to fearing them? Because we're only making them stronger if we do this. So in my family, I can only speak for my family and the way that I grew up, and I think that's the reason why I'm here today, is because there was no taboo for us. It was kind of like,
I really like that. And to all of our listeners, I think we've talked about this in the past, is simply giving something the power over you. And I really like the viewpoint of they're just people and it is taboo. I like your grandma's thought on that, because the more you give the power, the more power they have over you. So for our listeners, just don't, fear is kind of the basis of that.
I kind of want to like meet your grandma, because I feel like she would.
Sounds
I
awesome.
feel like she would
boss
tell
lady.
me. I feel like she'd tell me exactly what I need to do with my life, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Since we're on the topic of my grandmother, this is a story that she told me and my siblings. So my grandma she's a lady. She's a one of a kind woman, and she grew up the daughter of a medicine man. So in our culture, we have these. They're healers. They're kind of like doctors, not just for the body, but for the mind and the spirit. And they know the healing ways, and they know the songs that are associated with it. And so my great grandfather, his name is Olta Inez Belaguri. He is a well-known medicine man in the region where I'm from. And my grandmother is his daughter, and she grew up right by his side, and he kind of raised her like a man. He, by the age of 8, she was already knew how to load and shoot a rifle. They lived very traditional. They lived in the mountains outside of the Grand Canyon, and they lived off the land. They're very resourceful people. And so she got married, and she had her kids. I think at that point she had about 4 kids, and they lived on this top of this mountain. And the way that I remember her starting the story out was that she was alone with her kids, and her kids were, my uncles and aunts at that point were young. I think they were even 5 to toddler age, but they were young, and she was there by herself. And the house that she lived in, the traditional houses, we call them hogans, and it only had a rug door, so there's no door. And they lived by kerosene lamp. They lived by the fire, and so it's straight up living in the wilderness with her children. And she was known as this medicine man's daughter. And so the way that she explains it, she was often targeted because she was known, her family was known to do good, and people in the way that she explains it, if you're popular, if you're good, or if you are known to do good things, often these skinwalkers will target you because you have something that they don't often. And so she was up on this mountain, and she had her kids, and she was alone, and it was late at night, and she had just put her kids to bed, and she was putting things away, wrapping the food up, and she was sitting there putting things away, and then she heard an animal outside, and she was thinking, oh, it's just some random animal outside. But as she continued to listen, she was kind of had this feeling like it's not a natural animal. It's not, in her mind, like that's not right. It doesn't sound right. So she stopped what she was doing, put everything down, and was sitting there in silence for like the next 10 minutes. And she made out, the noise that she made out was a faint, like it sounded like hooves, like a horse. And it wasn't running around randomly like a horse would. It was kind of like taunting, like running at the house, running at the blanket door, and then taking off back into the night, running around the house in circles, kind of teasing. And she was like, that's not natural. And she was kind of thinking, oh, it's a yanagloshi. So she, once again, like I said, my grandma is not scared. She grabbed this, she had a gun. Once again, her father taught her how to use it. So she grabbed it and she loaded it as quietly as she could. And then she stood by that blanket and she waited till it circled around the house again. And then right when it got too near to the door, she flipped open that blanket and she took aim and she started shooting at it. And she was like, in her words, she was just like, I tried to aim as best as I could. I tried to get it. I wanted to kill it, And in her mind, she was just like, how dare you come near me and my kids? How dare you stalk in the night? If you want to come see me in the day. Like,
Oh yeah.
she was just like, it angered her. Like, how dare you come here? And so she shot at it, and then she heard it like whimper because she struck it, and she just kept shooting at it until she was out of rounds, and then it ran off. And then she said that she opened that blanket door, walked out, and I guess she shot it enough where a hoof was in the sand, and she shot one of the hoofs off. And so then she didn't touch it. She didn't want to touch it. So then she just called it good, went inside, went to sleep. In my mind, I'm like, how did you sleep, woman? Like, I would not even. But she went to sleep with her kids, and then the next morning, the hoof turned into a foot.
Oh.
And so there was a human foot, and she was like, oh yeah, it was a Yanako. She was a skinwalker. And then that point, once again, they protect their identities. So she told her father this experience, and then they just went around the community seeing he was missing a foot.
Yeah.
Did they end up finding anybody?
I don't remember that part. I'm gonna have to ask my mom. But I know that somebody. I think they found out something. I just have to ask my mom or my grandma. She remembers.
I am curious though, and maybe this is just me overthinking, is if it was like a horse creature that was running around and there was a hoof left, would that be a hand or a foot that was missing?
She must have shot the back foot.
Like maybe the back foot or maybe one of the hands from the front.
No, but it was a foot.
It turned into a foot the next morning, so it had.
Oh, it had to have been a back foot.
I don't even know what to say. I'm like speechless.
Yeah.
Dude, your grandma sounds amazing.
She is.
Just strength. That's crazy. And I've had one experience where I trained a kid who he lived his whole life on the Navajo reservation, and he moved away. And I think he kind of had a falling out with his family. And he came to Provo, and I was training him in this restaurant. And like I told you before, I've asked everyone's scary story. So I tried so hard not to talk because I just wanted to like respect his, space and sensitivities or whatever. And finally, I just kind of was like, could you share anything about Skinwalkers? And he kind of stopped what he was doing. And he's like, I wouldn't normally talk about it, but I'll share a couple things with you. And just everything he said has been so confirmed. Like, they target people who are doing well. And their goal is to because they don't have that, they want to bring them down and things like that. And that was huge for me because that's nothing you've ever heard. But yeah, so your I don't know. I'm just in awe.
It's nice to know though that I'm never going to be a target because I'm not doing very well.
The fact that it was your great grandfather was a medicine man. Mm-hmm. I almost feel like would that be considered almost like the opposite of skinwalkers, right? Because they're healing and they use everything they can, every resource they can to help heal and bring good, and it's almost like that's what the skinwalkers are doing. Or maybe I don't know, that's just a thought I had, and I was just curious what you kind of thought about that.
Yeah, I think that they are opposite because they use their knowledge and their healing powers for good. The concept on the Navajo Nation, like I said, it's called Hojo, which means everything is in harmony. Your mind, your body, and not just you, but with nature. And so that's what they did. They use songs, they use herbs. Some of them are crystal readers and different things like that, to help people get back in that harmony and that balance. So they was for good.
So becoming a medicine man, is that something that you're chosen to do because a previous medicine man senses something in somebody and they reach out to them and say, hey, you have the potential? Or can anybody become one and go through like, not like an official school, but I assume they have a medicine man as like their mentor?
Yeah,
and walks them through. So can anybody do it?
I think from what I understand, and once again, I'm only going off of what I know, you would have to, if you want to, you would have to approach a medicine man to be your apprentice. But once again, it depends on the medicine man and how much of a desire that you have to learn. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather, I was just out of my family reunion up in this same mountain where my grandmother had this experience about a week ago, and my aunts and my uncles were explaining that my great grandfather became a medicine man because he wanted to, and so you kind of have to go through a process, through steps. So,
do medicine men work regular jobs? Because I assume being a medicine man isn't a paid vocation.
Oh no, it's not.
It's almost like a calling, like it's something that they just do naturally. So,
well, back in the day, back in like traditional times, it was something that they would do full time because people just lived so far away. They would go from ceremony to ceremony. People would pay them with fruit or with some things of the
resources.
Crops. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, because it's more modern, they do have, I think some of them have separate jobs. It all depends on how much time they want to give to it. They don't accept payment through resources anymore. It's kind of through money, blankets, and jewelry and that kind of thing.
Do you think that's obscured any medicine men and they've kind of used it as like a tool for like greed? Like, has anybody, like false priest and preacher, you know what I mean?
I would say no, but of my personal opinion, I think that the craft of a medicine man has changed because things have become modern. It's not like traditional times. Medicine men like my great grandfather are not around anymore because my mom was telling me he knew 12 songs, which in our culture was like, that's a lot. Whereas one of my aunts was saying medicine men nowadays, they only know maybe 3 or 4. So it's kind of like, it's sad that a lot of things are not as they used to be back in the day. Mm-hmm. My mom even said ceremonies that we had when we were children are not like they are today. They're not like, they're different. So I think as time has progressed, as technology has progressed, as all these things are changing, unfortunately some aspects like how we do these things are changing as well.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. So the next one I prepared was my personal experience. So so my family, we also live within the reservation, and the house that we live in it sits on a land that belongs to my father. So it has been in his family for a while now. So it's like people know where we live. And that's kind of how it goes on the reservation. You live where your family is from. So you don't just live randomly somewhere. Most people know, like this is this person's house, or this person in this family, they're known for this and they live in this region. So people know who you are and who your family is. So we live on my father's land, and it was just me, my sister, my brother, and my mom. My father, growing up, he was a traveling construction worker, industrial construction, so he wasn't home a lot. So he was out on a job, and we came home and everybody went to sleep, and my house has no AC. My parents live in the desert and they have no AC, which I don't understand, but that's how I grew up. And so everything was open. The windows were open, the doors were open, and only the screen door was shut. anything to get air within the house. And it always used to bother me that they didn't close the blinds, but we had no blinds to put on, no curtains on the windows. So everybody went to sleep, and me, my brother, and my sister shared a room, and then my mom had her room, and they're right next to each other. It's a small house, it's not very big. And so my bed, I'm sleeping, and at the foot of my bed is a window. And outside the window, there's a light post. So the light post shines light into the window. So we have that light post, and then there's another light post on the other side that kind of just shines so you can see around the whole house. And then there's motion lights too, and when you walk past them, they turn on. And so everybody was asleep. It was midnight. I remember I was watching a movie on my laptop, and I was laying in bed, and my little sister was laying beside me. And so I had shut the laptop, and I put it down, and I was just listening to the night. There was crickets, and the dogs had all laid down, and it was nighttime. People were going to sleep. And I was drifting off, starting to fall asleep. And then I heard footsteps. And I don't know if you've ever been in a desert, but you can hear when people step on rocks. It's like, and I remember I was thinking, oh, the dogs. And so I was getting ready to close my eyes again, and then it walked again, and I was thinking, the footsteps are too heavy for a dog, but the dogs aren't barking. And so then the footsteps getting closer and closer, and in my mind I was thinking, they're walking towards the window, and sure enough, that person, and at that point I had closed my eyes because I was so scared. And so that person, I don't know if you have ever felt this feeling where you just know someone's there. You just know that they're looking at you or that they're watching you. You just have that feeling in your body, and that's what I felt laying there, because my face is right directly in front of that window, and I just felt them looking at me and eyeing me through that window. And I so scared. I was so stiff. I don't know if you've ever been scared to the point where you can't move. I remember there was this, I wanted to scream, but it was stuck in my throat. And the only thing that I could do was throw the blanket over my face. And I was laying there, and I was shaking, and I was scared, petrified. And then I quickly, in my mind, I thought, the screen doors are open. I don't know, I didn't know if there was one, if there was two. But I was thinking, my screen doors are open, my family's sleeping, I'm the only one who knows that this person is there. So I remember I told myself, Leah, get up out of this bed, and you have to go in there and run and tell your mom. Because I knew this person's watching me, so if they see me run up, they're going to run too. So I mentally prepared myself, and then I was like, okay, on 3, 1, 2, 3. Kicked off the blanket, rolled out of my bed, and I ran in my mom's room, and then I heard that person run off too. They ran off. And then I walked in my mom's room, kneeled down by her bed, and I shook her. I grabbed her arm, and I shook her, and I said, Mom. And she woke up, and she was looking at me, and she's like, what? She was sleeping. And I whispered, I was like, Mom, there's someone outside my window. And then her eyes got really big. I remember that. But she didn't scream. She kind of like gathered herself. And then she got up and she said, be quiet. And then we walked into the living room. And I remember there's a window by the side of the house that you can see those 2 light posts. And so she walked in, she walked to that window, and she pulled open a little bit open. So I think that was the only one that we had a blind on, because I remember she pulled it a little bit. And there was a person leaning on that light post. And they were in the part where it was dark. So the light shining out, but they were standing by the light post where it's dark. and it looked like they were leaning on it. Like their hands crossed, their legs crossed, and they were leaning on it. And they were looking straight at us. And that made my mom angry. I remember she was like, oh! She made that noise. And like she's my grandmother's daughter. She's her mother's daughter. And then so we went in her room. And then she pulled out a gun out of nowhere. And I was like, Mom, where did that come from? She's like, I had this ready to go. And I remember she kept saying, be quiet, be quiet. And so then she walked into my room and my brother was sleeping. She shook him. She said, hey, get up. And then I was like, Mom, what about Lynn? What about my little sister over here? She's like, no, leave her asleep. She's dead weight. She's going to cry. She's going to scream. Just leave her be. And so we're like, okay. So we left her in that bed. So my little sister's sleeping through this whole thing. But we rendezvoused in the living room, and my mom goes, okay, she turned to my brother, she goes, here, I'm going to give you these keys. You jump in our truck. When I say go, you run in there, turn it on, and then in our truck, my dad had a spotlight. It's the spotlights that you plug into the little power thing in by the console. It's powered by the truck. She's like, you turn it on, plug that spotlight in, and then I'll jump in too, and we'll chase it. We'll chase that person. And so, and I said, Mom, what do you want me? She said, you stay on the porch and you make sure nobody comes in, because we don't know how many is out there. And so I said, okay. And then I remember so she goes, ready? And she was looking at us. She said, don't be scared. We can't afford that right now. Don't be scared. And so then she was ready. 1, 2, 3. And then we're like, okay, go. And then she opened that screen door. She kicked it open and she ran out there, and she was just like, how dare you? Why are you here? This is my home. Get away from my home. I remember she was so mad, and she cocked it, and then you could just hear her. My brother took off, and they were searching out, and you can just see them in the distance. They were at that spotlight. They had the gun. They were back at the truck. They were just going for it. And I remember just standing on the porch, and I was thinking, my mom, man, you don't mess with Mama Bear. Like, she is mad. And so she just kept going. And then eventually she came home, and she said, we didn't find him or anything like that. And so we all went to bed, or we tried to go to bed. And I remember I slept by her that night. I was sleeping by her. And then the next day we got up, and then my cousins, they live right the next door. And so my mom went over and she told them what happened. So they got on their 4 tracks. I remember my cousins got on their 4 tracks, and they went and they were searching for these tracks. And it led them. So behind my house, there's a riverbed. And then there's like these rock formations. They're kind of like mini mesas. And there was in that rock formation, there was like a little cave. It's not a full on cave, but it's like where it's like a mini like siding open into the cave where you can, like, a person can go in there and hide. And they said they followed the tracks, and that person was laying down there in that little cave thing. And then they followed the tracks into the riverbed, but it was so sandy, eventually the tracks went away. And then my mom was just like, ew, I don't know what that, she was like, it's probably a skinwalker, but well, she was just like, I don't care what it was, who it was. I remember she was telling me, this thing is unwelcome here, and we made it clear to it last night that it shouldn't come back. And so I remember that. And then, but that side of my family, my cousins, they're very into traditional ways. And so, without telling me or my mom, they went to a medicine man with my dad. My dad's more in traditional ways than we are. So they went with my dad, and they saw this medicine man or whatever, and they didn't tell him They didn't tell him anything that happened to me, to my mom. They didn't tell him any details of that night. And they went to him and he was like, you have a daughter, don't you? To my dad. My dad was like, yeah, I have 3. And he goes, well, one of them, they came in close contact with evil. I feel it. But she saw it. She saw it before it could do anything. And then my dad was like, you're right. And then he told him this is what happened to my wife and my kids when I wasn't home. And I remember my dad, the medicine man, telling my dad, well, your family has good medicine because your daughter knew, like your daughter caught them in the act, was what he told him. And so that was my personal experience with this. And it's traumatic to me, and I'm kind of shaking as I tell this story because I'm just remembering how scary it was and how it just made me feel. And to this day, I can't sleep with a window open. I can't sleep with the blinds open, even in my own house. Sometimes it's hard for me, but especially when I go home, I can't sleep in that room anymore. And my family understands, so they give me other accommodations, but I know that these are people. I know that they just go and they're evil, but just that memory of being scared has been etched into my body and into my mind. So that was my personal experience with the Skinwalker in my life.
Wow.
That's incredible.
I can't even imagine like what I would be thinking if the window was open at the foot of my bed and I heard that and felt that feeling of someone being there. That would have been terrifying.
My favorite part in that whole thing was when your mother devised that plan. Before she left, she told you, don't be scared. We can't afford that.
Yeah.
Dude, I felt like she was telling me that, bro.
Honestly.
And like
Mom's
in
a
life,
bad
don't
A.
be scared. And I was like, okay.
That's something that's probably, obviously it stuck with you, but that little piece of advice, I feel like that's something that would come into my mind anytime I'm scared.
Yeah, and I was just at their house this week and they still live the same. Like the screen doors are still open. Like everything is still the same. And because I want to get to that point in my life where there's just no fear. Like there's just no, I'll continue living my life the way that I will kind of attitude.
It's unwavering, Don't change for the circumstance,
Sometimes after stories, we kind of recap what did you learn. And so what I've learned from your 2 stories is do not mess with the Hardy women. Your last name's Hardy, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, do not mess with the Hardy women. They are down, man. They're ready to go.
My takeaway is spring for that air con. Then you ain't gonna leave the doors open.
Oh man.
How old were you when that happened, actually?
I think I was 16.
16?
Yeah, I was.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a teenager. My little sister, she was like 13. But yeah,
Just leave her.
We
She's
wa-
dead, right?
my mom's like, she's just gonna cry, and she woke up the next morning, refreshed because she had a full night's sleep, and she's like, "Oh, what happened?" And
What are y'all grumpy
Why is
about?
everyone shaking?
Why are you guys still sleeping? It's noon.
Oh, man.
So does she finally know what happened?
yeah, and then
She a little bit salty?
no, because she was like, "Thank you for letting me sleep."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She should, yeah.
She's like, y'all seem to handle it fine. That's wild.
I also liked kind of your initial reaction. I felt like the way you told the story was so honest, because initially you were talking about how terrified you were.
Yeah.
And then it's I think that's a real thing that you experience when you are in a situation like that. I don't care who you are, you feel that fear, but then
What do you
either
do
it
with
takes
it?
either you take your mom, she gathered herself within seconds, right?
Yeah.
Or in other people, it gives them time, or they don't even get to that point and they just sit in that fear. And so I thought that was like a really cool detail because, you know, I mean, we've probably all experienced like crazy things. That's not like that, but you know, in those situations where your initial reaction is just that intense fear where you're just like, you're so powerless, and then you wait a second, I have power. I am not powerless here. And I thought that was like powerful, that part of that aspect of the story.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
You know, you said that when your dad went to the medicine man, he said that something about like you like having the gift or like it ran in your family because you were able to stop them in the act.
You have good medicine.
Good medicine. Is that what that was?
Yeah, well, I asked for clarification on this. So from what my dad explained it to me was kind of like we have goodness in our home. Like we have there's love in our home. There's a special way that we go about in our home. And that's what my dad explained it to us, was just our home is a sacred place for us.
So like the words that came from the medicine man were good medicine, essentially.
Yeah, like your family and the way that you live your lives in your house is, and specifically in your home, is what was powerful. And he was like, and you know, my dad was telling me that's probably the reason why they came. Like I said, they find things that are good and they want to, you know, destroy it, or they want to scare it.
Yeah.
And I think that it just runs in my blood. My grandmother, she was just one who was kind of these things were attracted to her, but it was always taught to me, like, you acknowledge it, but then you don't give it power once again. So I think that's kind of the takeaway that my father explained to me. And these weird things have always happened to me. I remember as teenager, I think it was either the year before, I was driving with my brother. My mother sent us into town to go get some milk. And as we were driving, it was night, an owl flew into our windshield. And it was out of nowhere. I thought someone threw a rock at our windshield, and sure enough, my brother was like, "Oh, it's a bird. You can see the feet sticking out of the windshield." So we found this gas station. We pulled in, and then I was like, "I'm just turning around. We're gonna go home." So we went home, and then I remember my same cousins who helped me in the story I just told. They came over and they took out, and they pulled it out, and it was an owl.
Whoa. And
owls in Navajo tradition, they are wise. They symbolize death. They are they kind of like messengers between the spirit and the world here. And then according to that, so that bird, the owl, wasn't dead. It was just stuck in the windshield. So they took it out, and then once they laid it on the ground, it limped away. And I remember my aunt saying, "Don't touch it, just let it go wherever it wants to go." We didn't think anything of it. My mother's not a superstitious woman. But they once again took that to the medicine man, because they're superstitious people. According to him, the owl gave his life for mine because I was supposed to die that night or something like that. And then that's when my dad sat me down. He was like, "You know, you can take this information as you will, but it seems like these things are attracted to you, because it's almost like I have a sensitivity to it."
Yeah.
Which I'm cool with that, but yeah, that's kind of
It's the strong
goes
women
with
in
it.
your family, your grandma, your
Yeah.
mom. You know?
yeah, you know, I'm good with it. I'm glad.
Just a little bit, because my mom, she went and lived on the res.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, I don't know if it's like with all Navajo, but she said someone passed away in the home, and so they didn't go into the home for the whole year. Now, is that something?
Yeah, death is it's almost, death is viewed differently. It's like when somebody passes away, you don't talk about them anymore. A lot of times, the homes and their belongings were burned, or they didn't go into it for a year, and that's just to respect that they're not here anymore. I heard one person tell me once that it's kind of to let that spirit know, hey, you're dead. Go on, move on to the journey, and it's out of respect that you Navajos, and I think this could also be said for Native Americans in general. We're very private people. We hold a lot of things sacred. Things are only talked about certain times. There's certain parts of the year where only special stories are told. Only certain parts of the year where ceremonies are done. Certain stories are only told with certain people. So death is one of those things where it's almost a very private thing.
Well, thank you. So that was the one of the things she shared. And the other one was, I think she was in a family who also really liked to tell stories and scary stories.
Yeah.
So she's this 8-year-old girl, and they would say, watch the mesas, because at night you'll see them running.
Yeah.
And she says, to this day, my mom cannot look at mesas at night because it scares her that much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are the two things she said.
So that's actual like folklore, or like
some of the most common stories that you hear about skinwalkers is that they run along the cars when cars drive, and you'll hear them tapping on the tail lights or tapping on your window because they're running right alongside you, and then you look in the rearview mirror and there's a pair of red eyes looking at you. And
is that them? Is that them hunting you or just playing around?
They're just
with
playing with you. They're trying to scare you, like I
show their
said.
Power.
like take your happiness and like instill fear almost.
Yeah, because I feel almost like they feed off of it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's that, and then there's some where they will stand and they'll go to people's houses and just look into windows, look who's sleeping and tap on the window and stand in doorways. Just terrorizing people. This story was told to me by my dad. So back in the day, they had boarding schools on the reservation, and in the 60s, my dad he lived in one of these boarding schools. So they take these kids from all over the reservation and they put them into one school where they live. And then they're young. My dad went when he was 5. So you have these little kids living far from home, all in one place. And it's also to assimilate them into American culture. My dad was punished for speaking Navajo. He used to spank his hand with a ruler to learn to speak English. So he was away at this boarding school. And he was telling us that one night they all put the kids to bed. In the they had dorm maids who worked at night where they walked around to, just make sure the kids were sleeping and whatnot. And he said that he was sleeping on his bunk bed and his bunkmate got up. Not the bunkmate. So they lived in rooms where there was a bunch of bunk beds, but there was all one big hall where they lived in. And one of the young boys got up to use the bathroom. And the bathroom, I guess, was located in the hallway where there was the big glass doors at the end of the hallway. And so my dad didn't think anything of it when one of the little boys went to the bathroom. But then he said that they heard he went in to use the bathroom after him. So he's like, I should get up and use the bathroom too. So he's right behind this boy. So the boy was ahead of him walking down the hallway. The bathroom's on one side of the hallway and the other hallway is a glass door. And so that little boy, my dad said, I was just walking. He was walking. I was walking and I was just watching him as he got closer and closer and closer to that window. And then he looked out that window and then he screamed this just loud scream, and he was so scared and he fell down and he was trying to get away and he was just screaming, had his hand over his face, and he's just a child in complete terror. And then my dad goes, "What?" And then he walked up, and they said in that glass door was this man, and he had white paint, white ash all over his body, and he had long dread-like hair. All it was covering his face, and he was naked except for breeched cloth, and he was holding a stick or something, and he was looking at them through that door. And then that boy was just terrified. And then my dad said, I only caught a glimpse, that enough to provide a description, and I got scared. And these are all kids that were raised on the reservation, and they knew what it was. And so it caused like a pandemonium. Everybody was screaming, everybody was terrified, and they had to have all the dormaids come in, and remember the security guards went around patrolling the area, but he was just remember it was like the whole hall, and all these little boys were screaming, and even those who didn't even see it were scared in their beds. And he was just like, it was so terrifying. And he's like, into this day, that image of that skinwalker is burned into his mind. And I just remember him telling me that experience as well. But that was a short one.
From like what you've told me, it sounds like that encounter is exactly what that skinwalker wanted. Just like causing that much fear through that many children. That's like a feast, you know.
And it's almost like it doesn't matter if you're a child or if you're an adult. It's nobody's is left alone.
It's almost like they just see it as energy, regardless of like who it's from.
Yeah, unless they have like a bone to pick with a specific person. It's like if they can get fear, doesn't matter if the fear is coming from a child or a fully matured adult. The energy is the same to them.
I think it's kind of interesting too that since their thing is to feed on fear, like that fear has boiled over to people who know nothing about it, and that even just being more educated on who they are and that they are just people can help people be more prepared if something were to happen. Because like the experience we had over in Tahoe where you guys were talking about scary stories and someone just got up and walked away. Like that fear, they've never been on a reservation probably. All they are is afraid of that word.
Yeah.
So I think being more aware and educated is helpful and helps you be more prepared.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think I don't know how many people are going to listen to this or what they're going to think, and if they're Native American themselves, but I am of the same mindset. I think the more you talk about it, the more that you make it to a point where it's not so scary, you're lessening that power that they have. But that's just my personal opinion. So.
Though, if you are listening around a campfire, you're probably going to be scared by these stories right now.
Yeah, you will be scared. Go in twos to the bathroom, you know.
You go in twos.
But like the night is grandfather, so it's all good.
Yeah,
Dude, I loved that.
I love that.
This next one is short. It's my mother's. Once again, we were young. Sleeping in back of trucks is like a theme. We do it all the time. And it's kind of like how it is on the reservation. There's no cousins once removed or whatever white people do. It's like everybody's cousins, everybody's your brother and sister. There's no boundary like that. And so we literally ran around with all of our cousins, and we called them brother and sister. And we all slept in the back of the truck because it's hot in Arizona. And so one night we were sleeping, all of my cousins and I were sleeping, and we were trying to sleep, but we were too busy being rowdy, and my mom was sleeping in the back of the truck with us, and she had given up on us going to sleep. So we were all just sitting there, just, talking and teasing each other. Native kids roast each other. We don't tease. We make each other cry kind of thing. You got to be able to take a joke. I remember we were just, sitting back of the truck. It was a nice night. And then my mom looks out to the dirt road, which was about half a mile from where we were. And then she goes, "Look, do you see that big dog? Call it over here." She thought it was one of the dogs that my cousins had. And they're like, we were calling it. I forgot its name, but we were like, "Puppy, come here, puppy. Come on, come sleep. Sit down and sleep by us." But it didn't move. And my mom was like, "No, that dog is too..." I remember my cousin's like, "That dog's too big to be one of our dogs." But it was sitting there like a dog, looking at us. And my mom was like, "That's weird." And it was just like this black figure, like a big, big black dog. And then my mom was like, she started getting like, okay, I don't think that's a dog. And so I remember we were just sitting there watching it. And then she was like, "Let's turn the truck around and shine the lights at it." So then she turned the truck on. And then I remember we were all laying in the back. She's like, "Everybody just hang on." So she gets in, turns it on, and she turns it around to shine the light at it. But within that time, she got out, and we were all busy turning the truck around. When she turned the headlight towards it, it was gone. And so and the rest of kind of like my life, you just have little things like that where like you see this figure in the distance, or you hear a whistle in the night, and you sense something is coming and it's bad, kind of thing. So
For the story, like for story's sake, that's always like so inconvenient. But with what you shared earlier and how their identity is pretty much like their lifeline, like that makes perfect sense for their sake, to survive. And it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because it is like risky for them to show themselves.
Yeah, like they need to be around, like they need to instill the fear and like feed off of it from what it sounds like, but they can't be close enough. It's like Icarus, with the wax wings, and he flew too close to the sun, fell to his death. But kind of the same principle with these skinwalkers.
Yeah, my grandma used to always say, if you can recognize them as they're running away, call out their name. And if just by simply calling out their name, they have to die, if you're right.
So you're just guessing names, yelling them as they like...
Well, I mean...
Gerald, Steve, Crystal.
Your least favorite person.
Chad. You throw out your sister's name, she's like, "Hey."
But I mean, you would have to at least have a good guess, or if you're suspicious of somebody in the community.
You don't see them the next day, you're like...
Yeah, that's happened. That's happened before. There's stories like that where they like, "Oh, what happened to so and so?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, we kind of have idea what happened to you."
That's crazy.
That's
where
so
it's like everybody understands that, so it's like normalizing their culture. So the way you just like described it, like I don't know. It's
Where's
just like,
Kyle at? I haven't seen him for a few days. Like,
it's like, oh. Well, he's probably a skinwalker or something.
Well,
oh yeah, that makes sense.
it's like extreme cases. I remember my dad telling me this story about how this guy was suspicious of his neighbor was gushing him, and so he went and built like this elaborate net or whatever. And the story goes he caught him in the net as he was being a skinwalker and in whatever. So people are legit ready. Like some of them are ready to capture one. Some of them are ready to just go. Yeah. Some of it's kind of mixed emotions. Some of them are scared. They don't even want to talk about it. And then some of them are like, we want to catch as many as we can, kind of thing.
That's my crew right there. Let's go catch them.
Oh gosh. I have like a super short experience. It's not mine. So I have a friend who is from South America, and he played a lot of basketball with some Navajo guys, and they shared a story that they had when they were little. And so they lived up a canyon, and it was like a narrow road. It was really rural. And one night when they were coming home, I think from playing basketball, their mom's driving them in a car, and they pull up and they come around this corner and they can look up and see their house, their silhouette of the house with the setting sun behind it. So they're in the back of the car and they're talking, and all of a sudden mom slams on the brakes. And they're like, they kind of readjust and they look at mom and they're like, Mom, what's going on? Shh. And she's clutching the steering wheel and staring up at the house. And they're like, look at her, and they can feel something's wrong. And they look up at their house and they just see a silhouette of a man standing on their house. Ooh. And they're like, Mom, who's... Shh. She says again. She's like, be quiet. And they kind of started to understand what was going on. And they said their mom and the man on the house like sat in a standoff, like a stare off for 10 minutes until finally he walked to the edge of the house, hopped off and ran away. And instead of going inside, she just put the car in reverse, went down the hill, and they didn't come back for like a week.
Holy cow.
But yeah, super short experience, but still super scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only story that I have, besides the typical running next to the car one that I feel like all of us have heard, comes from a friend of mine, and it makes so much more sense now with how it fizzled out or played out at the very end of the story. But they were playing basketball one night on their driveway, and they had like an outside like porch light to light up like their little court, and their grandpa was with them, just sitting in a chair facing the house, watching them play ball. But besides the light, like it was like they lived on the reservation as well, so it's dark out, no really other street lights because you're in the middle of the desert. Mm-hmm. And while they're playing basketball, it's my friend and I believe his brother, they hear like rustling in some bushes next to this tree in their front yard, and it's just at like the threshold of the light where it starts getting dim, like you can see but not really, and they see this dark figure peeking around the tree. And my friend says to his grandpa, he's like, Grandpa, I think, did you hear that, or do you see anything back there? And the grandpa, staring at the house watching them play basketball, doesn't pay attention to the tree behind him, and he just says, just keep playing basketball. Like, pay no attention to it, So they keep playing basketball.
They're all, pass the ball.
Shoot it.
Fouled.
It's like, go for the touchdown. Just like completely forget how to play ball. But their dad or their uncle, somebody comes home, and from time to time they can still hear like this rustling, and he's just trying not to look because he doesn't want to see this figure looking back at him. But they come, an uncle or dad drives home, and the car's headlights flashes across the tree. They don't see anything, but they hear the rustling again, almost like it was hiding. Mm. But apparently the uncle or whoever came home saw it. Not in its entirety, but enough to know that something was hiding behind the tree. So their uncle or whoever grabs a flashlight out of the truck and starts walking towards the tree, shining it at the tree. Doesn't say anything. And they watch as this thing just runs off into the desert. They never see it again. But I don't know. From what we've discussed, it sounds like almost like it ran away and was hiding, so they couldn't see who it was. Maybe it was somebody they knew. We'll probably never know, but
I like how the grandpa was just like, just continue, like don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to feed it, just keep playing basketball.
Mm-hmm. I am curious. So like Skinwalkers are at the apex of like Navajo like folklore, and is there any other like other legends or folklore around different entities or other things that are I don't know, subject of children's nightmares in Navajo culture?
I think that was the main one I grew up with, but it's also like the boogeyman, like,
Okay.
you know, like it's going to get you if you don't behave. But it's also like Navajo, like just the stories and the history. My grandma used to tell stories because she learned them from her father, who was the medicine man. He also kept history of Navajo, how they think that the world came to be, and all these different things. And in their stories of their creation, there's monsters in them, but they're not scary. They're almost like this. They're necessary kind of thing. Like they brought bad things, but the world needed bad things to outweigh the good kind of thing. So there's monsters in there's monsters in the Navajo creation stories, but they're not bad. They're not evil. It's almost like they were there. They had a purpose. They were still bad, but there was substance to them for why we needed them.
Okay.
Almost like an ecosystem.
Yeah, the forest needs to burn, animals need to eat other animals, that kind of thing. Like that understanding where it all goes together kind of thing. But as far as being scared, it's almost like it's fun to be scared. It's almost like like it's a sport, to tell stories and to be scared, but also at the same time, it's almost like, in some cases, it's just like, Navajos are very humorous people, but it's also like, let's laugh, let's be funny and let's tell funny things. So it's scary, but it's also like people like to laugh and like to joke. So there's a lot of stories where there's a lot of humor mixed into it as well.
Every time, we haven't done it recently, but every time I've ever had a story session, I always kind of made it a rule to finish on good stories to clear the air. Mm-hmm. Just because, I don't know, you don't want to walk away from the circle being affected or scared because you're kind of impaired in a way, So I don't know. Just hearing that, like, you guys mix in scary stories, funny and humorous things. Humor, is like the perfect medicine for fear.
Yeah.
And that is, honestly, it's like a balance we've like done here is like sometimes someone will be telling a scary story, like I'm so in it, and then someone cracks a joke and just breaks the tension, and it's like, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's that roller coaster, scary, happy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I wish I could take you home to my cousins. They are better than me. Like, scare your socks off.
I'm super down.
We also got to take it
Jump in the
step by
back of the
step
truck.
because this was pretty. I don't know. This was like pretty scary, but also like enlightening. But
It's almost like, for me personally, like I get scared pretty easily, with like things like, I don't know, like supernatural things. But like when it comes to like people, I'm for some reason not afraid of people, because I'm just like, it's just another person. Like, they're gonna have to get through me, if like it's a serious, scary situation. So it's like the perspective and seeing the reality of like where they come from and who they are. It's like, it's so like empowering. Like your grandma, your mother, you, like this, like the confidence and the power that comes with that confidence, and that not giving that fear away, and like keeping yourself kind of grounded and in those situations. It's just like, I don't know, like I'm not like scared, like, you know what I mean? Like I almost like don't need a happy story to feel better. Like sure. I feel good right now, but maybe that's just because I just really appreciate your storytelling, and I'm just like geeking out right now weirdly. But
no, yeah, you're like, definitely your stories were terrifying, but it's also, you put it into perspective that everything has a place. We definitely have our place here, and just knowing our place and how to respond in those kind of situations. It's like, be unmoving.
Yeah. And I think that's what allures me personally to scary stories in the first place. I mean, you can be scared and you can be terrified, but at the end of the story, you're still the person in charge of you and what you're afraid of and what you're going to allow to linger and scare you. So in my opinion, the more scary stories, the better, because you just get better at managing your emotions and turning whatever anxiety or be fear and using it to lead to action. So that's, in my opinion, that's what scary stories should be doing for you.
Right.
That is a cool.
Amen.
I agree.
What scares you the most?
What scares me the most?
Yeah. Scary stories, like, is there one subject you're like, oh?
Anything that has to do with... I used to be really afraid of, like, exorcism stuff. So anything that has to do with, like, religion, like Christianity and scary stories, I'm just like, ugh. That used to just always be a trigger for me. But not so much now. It's more with anything with little kids. Scary stories with little kids kind of just get me.
Like,
I can't
they're
sometimes.
the ones it's happening to, or they're the ones who's doing it? Okay.
Both.
Kids are scary.
They're just but more if it's happening to them. I'm like, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you would like to like sum up or share who to people to like help them understand or anything like that?
I guess it would be to those who are listening who are either Native American who come from a different indigenous tribe from any part of the world. I think that probably some will be upset with me for even sharing this information with you guys, but from my point of view and my perspective, these stories are meant for power. They're meant to share and to anyone who was willing to listen. And so that's my personal view on stories overall, is that some are specifically for you, some are specifically for your family, some are to be told in public. And the ones that I told were personal to me, to my family, but I also know that they would want these things to be heard as well. So I don't feel any guilt or any sort of like bad feeling for sharing these stories. I actually feel really glad that I did this because I'm so willing to share these different things. I think that they should be told.
I think we can all agree here from the guys here that this was really special. Maybe even the best episode we've had so far.
Definitely.
And we really appreciate you opening up and sharing these stories. And it has power. Like, I've felt it tonight, at least me personally. It's just been overall a really special night. So thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. I think there is a lot to be learned and understood and gained from these kind of things to take with us moving forward. So we hope that if you have more stories, maybe you come back and share them in the future.
Please come back.
Either or.
I'll ask my parents.
We're happy that you came through, so thank you. And to everyone out there, thank you so much for all of your support so far. I know we say it every episode, and it might be redundant, but we really do mean it. I mean, we're still pretty small, but all the support we've garnered has been amazing, and it like brightens our day that we're able to be a part of your life for an hour a week, you know? So thank you for checking us out.
I'm going to say something maybe you're not, whatever. But I honestly feel like tonight we came a little bit closer. We came a lot closer to what 3 a.m. should or could be. And it was this is a special episode. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This is awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you do have any stories, though, please send them to 3am podcast stories at gmail.com. We'd love to hear your stories as well.
I always say it at the close of every time. I lost a cousin when I was young, and so I've said it since I was little, because every time you part, it could be the last time you see someone. So ever since I was little, I used to say, bye, love you, be safe. So to our listeners out there, from me, bye, love you, be safe.
Trust your gut and watch your back.
Thanks for listening.